Good morning, students. This is Murthy sir. In the last class, we discussed about the fundamentals related to plant tissues, and also we discussed about meristematic tissues. Today, we will learn about dermal tissue and ground tissue. Dermal tissue in plants is primarily responsible for protection. In addition to that, the function of stomata in leaves and the function of root hairs in the root system, they also come under dermal tissue. Dermal tissue is basically of three types: epidermis, the outer layer, mesodermis, middle layer, and endodermis, inner layer. So this dermal tissue is divided into three layers: outer, middle, and inner layers. The cell walls of cells present in dermal tissue are thicker. Students, you know, the cell walls in plants are made up of cellulose. In case of desert plants, the cell walls are much more thicker for protection and to reduce transpiration. In desert, very hot conditions will be there and water is very scarce. Students, in this diagram, you can see the layers of dermal tissue. Epidermis and endodermis are labeled here, and it is the internal structure of root. Students, this is TS of dicot stem, and here also you can see the layers of dermal tissue. Epidermis and endodermis are labeled. In addition to dermal tissue, ground tissue and vascular tissue are also shown. The lower epidermis of leaves contains stomata, which are responsible for exchange of gases and transpiration, the entry of carbon dioxide into the leaves and exit of oxygen from the leaves takes place through stomata, and excess water will leave through stomata in the form of water vapor. Students, the stomata are present on the lower epidermis of leaves. On the upper epidermis, more number of chloroplasts are concentrated so that they will be exposed to sunlight to perform photosynthesis. Students, in this diagram you can see the opening and closing of stomata. This takes place with the help of Gott cells. When water enters into the Gott cells, they become turgid or swollen, and they move apart so that a small pore is formed. When water leaves the Gott cells, they become flaccid or loose, and the pore will be closed. Here you can see the stomata present on green leaves, the exchange of gases and the loss of excess water. Transpiration takes place through stomata. Clearly you can see in this diagram. Students, the epidermal secretions like latex, gums, resins in some plants, they are actually excretory products which are used by the plants for self-defense. Many herbivores will approach green plants to consume the leaves. So some defense mechanism is required by the plants to protect themselves. Here you can see the secretion of gum from the bark of a tree. So that is actually excretory product. And in the same way, latex secreted by some plants and trees like rubber tree. This latex of rubber tree is used for the manufacture of rubber. This industrial process of manufacture of rubber is called vulcanization. So they kept one small bowl. Into that, this latex will be collected. The epidermis in trees forms a thicker layer of dead cells called bark. This bark is impervious to gases and water. Gases and water cannot pass through this bark because it is a layer of dead cells which is meant for protection. Students, in our surroundings, you can observe the bark of some trees, mango tree, neem tree, those trees, very big trees. You can see this rough outer layer. It looks like this. Stomata and root hairs are part of dermal tissue in plants. Photosynthesis is also carried out by certain cells of dermal tissue. So these are different functions of dermal tissue. Students, now we will discuss about ground tissue. This ground tissue is also called simple permanent tissue. It is of three types: parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. Parenchyma and collenchyma, they contain living cells, whereas sclerenchyma, it contains dead cells. It's a dead tissue. The term parenchyma was coined by Nehemi Grew. He wrote the book The Anatomy of Plants. Anatomy is a branch of biology which studies the internal structure of organs. Students, you can see the photograph of Nehemi Grew. So he contributed for the study of anatomy of plants. The cells of parenchyma are soft, thin-walled, and loosely packed. It is of three types: chlorenchyma, arenchyma, and storage tissue. Students, this chlorenchyma is concerned with photosynthetic activity. If you see the internal structure of leaf, below the upper epidermis, parenchymatous tissue will be there. In that, palisade parenchyma and spongy parenchyma, two regions will be there. This palisade parenchyma comes under mesophyll tissue. It contains chloroplasts, and daytime, when the upper portion of the leaf is exposed to sunlight, it performs photosynthetic activity. Here you can see parenchymatous tissue. And chlorenchyma, as I told, it is responsible for photosynthesis. Daytime, it uses carbon dioxide and water to synthesize organic compound, carbohydrate. It is glucose. So this manufacture of carbohydrate takes place by the activity of chlorenchyma. So it is a type of parenchymatous tissue which is responsible for synthesis of food material. Students, in this diagram you can see chlorenchyma below the upper epidermis and leaves. Palisade and spongy parenchyma, they contain mesophyll cells. Here many number of chloroplasts are located. When the leaf is exposed to sunlight during daytime, it traps light energy, and for this biochemical process it uses carbon dioxide and water, and as a result carbohydrate is synthesized. Students, now let us see arenchyma. It is seen in floating aquatic plants, hydrophytes. In them, this arenchyma contains air spaces. Because of the air spaces, the plants are able to float on the surface of water. In these hydrophytes, three types are there: floating hydrophytes, emergent hydrophytes, and submerged. So because of the air spaces, buoyancy will be there. The plant body is able to float on the surface of water. In this diagram you can see many number of air spaces. Students, you can see the beautiful lotus plant here. It is an example for floating hydrophyte or aquatic plant. You can see the floating leaves and the beautiful lotus flower there. So arenchyma provides buoyancy. Now let us learn about the third type of parenchymatous tissue, storage tissue. It stores food materials, water, and waste materials. So this is one type of parenchymatous tissue which is concerned with storage of materials, that is food materials, waste materials, water, etc. So here you can see the storage tissue in parenchyma. Students, now we will move on to the second type of ground tissue or simple permanent tissue. It is collenchyma. This collenchyma has cells which are thick-walled and the cells are longer in size. Collenchyma provides tensile strength. That is, when the wind blows, the branches will move this way and that way, but they will not break. Here you can see the collenchymatous tissue. Students, in this collenchymatous tissue, the cells have thick walls and the cells are longer in size. And here you can see the movement of branches with wind force. So the branches will move, but they will not break. So this tensile strength or mechanical strength is provided by collenchymatous tissue. Students, the third type of ground tissue or simple permanent tissue is sclerenchymatous tissue. It contains dead cells. In the sclerenchyma, the cells are thick-walled and tightly packed. There will not be any intercellular spaces. And this is useful for protection and mechanical strength. You can see here sclerenchymatous tissue. The best example is the coir of coconut. The outer fibrous layer in coconut is sclerenchymatous tissue, which is meant for protection.